Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken?
Oh my God, I went to see a movie yesterday, Kiernan.
Uh-huh.
And some guy came to me.
Oh man, you're coming in hot.
Yeah, some guy came over and he looks at me and then he goes, "Is this seat taken?" And I was like, God. "Oh my God, is this a fan?" But he just needed a place. He needed a place to sit to watch the movie.
No, I said, "Oh my God," because you sat next to a stranger in these pandemic times. I mean, you're definitely going to get Omicron.
No, it was at this premiere for this new film, Fire Island. And
the entire gay community of New York was there.
Yeah, so I might get monkeypox. That's really the thing now. It's not. Well, we're beyond Omicron. And
how was the movie about Fire Island? Or should we do a Fire Island episode?
One day we'll do a Fire Island episode.
That might have to get a parental warning.
Yeah. No, it's a cute little kind of rom-com, and yeah, it was fun.
Well, Ryan, I'm sure listeners are at the edge of their seats based on the title of this episode, because if there's one place that people think of for great summertime fun, it's the Eastern Shore of Maryland.
The Eastern Shore of Maryland is Maryland's summertime capital, of course.
It's sort of the Miami of the Mid-Atlantic.
You know what? I'm going to suggest that they use that in some of their marketing materials. That's good. Not bad. The Miami of the Mid-Atlantic Miami.
And of course, this is the land that gave us Ryan J. Davis.
It is true. I was born and raised 18 years on Maryland's Eastern Shore, and I'm going to share some of the things that are cool about it and what make it, I think, a quality travel destination. And
this may well be, we're going to go from our highest downloaded episode to our lowest. No, the Christmas spectaculars will always be the lowest.
Well, we need to first we got to give a shout out to our new friends over there at Apple Podcast.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Who were kind enough to feature us on the front page of the Discovery tool last week under a curated list of travel podcasts that they call Manifesting a Getaway. And I think we were only one removed from Rick Steves.
Yeah, we were one seat away from Rick Steves.
Yeah, it's like Rick Steves, The Economist Travel, and us.
Yeah, if the World Wanderers had just dropped out, we would be right next to Rick Steves.
Yes. So I think this is yet another sign that Rick's going to come on the pod this year. The momentum is building.
Yes, and Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown podcast, also part of this elite grouping here. Yeah,
he's not going to be able to make the pod. So welcome to all the new listeners who've come through the Manifest Your Getaway. Welcome to Out of Office. We've been doing this for a while, so we got a catalog of 120 other episodes to go explore. And near the end of the year, we'll do a wrap up with some of our favorites, so you can check that out. But this month, May, we're recording in May. This is coming out in June, but May was our biggest download month ever. So thank you to everybody who's been giving us those ratings and reviews.
Yes, particularly. I mean, Ryan and I do read everyone and get a kick out of them. But we also appreciate it. I think that's probably what got us on Apple, and that's how people find the podcast and grow. And many people in your life are probably considering where they're going to travel this summer now that everyone's decided to pretend we don't have a pandemic. And so chances are we probably have a guide in the catalog for the country or the city that they want to go visit. And Ryan, I was thinking, I know a lot of people are wary of traveling outside of the U.S. yet. But we've got a lot of people who are doing, internal to U.S. travel. So I think we're going to have to dial up some new national parks episodes this summer.
Oh, I think this is going to be a great summer for some of those lesser known national parks. You don't have to always go to Yellowstone as we've talked about.
People are scrambling for the Badlands. I love the Badlands in South Dakota. I feel a Badlands episode in our near future.
I think that would be pretty bad.
Please don't rate that joke.
No, it's funny. Somebody left a review a couple days ago, and it says Ryan is the best, and they gave us 4 stars. So, not the 5-star. They weren't willing to go there, but I feel like Kiernan, maybe you were pulling us down to that 4-star.
That's very funny.
Yeah.
Wait, where is that a real one?
That's a real one. Yeah, that's the most recent.
Ryan, you are the best. It's Ryan exclamation mark. You are the best space exclamation mark.
Yeah.
Cool glasses. Oh, there's a name here. Do you know this person?
I Googled the person. I have no idea who they are, but it is very nice that they left a review. We would appreciate the 5 stars, but if you only want to go for the 4, I understand. It's like...
No. We're not sending that message. And I want to say to Lucas, fan Lucas of Ryan here, why don't you reach out? We've got outofofficepod@gmail.com. You can let us know, first of all, why is Ryan the best? Secondly, why we were able to give it that 5th star. And, you tell me what if it's me, you can tell me and what about me is turning you off so hard.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. I mean, I have a whole list. So
maybe you two can collaborate.
Well, we've got a lot to get to today, Kiernan. We're going down to the Eastern Shore, as they say, and I think it's time to take off.
Tell the cabin crew.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
So the Eastern Shore of Maryland is part of the Delmarva Peninsula, or Delmarva, and Delmarva is sort of an interesting peninsula because on the top of it you've got pretty much the entire state of Delaware. Then in the middle you've got the Eastern Shore of Maryland, which we're going to talk about. And then below that, you've got this little kind of like bit of Virginia, which we're not going to talk about today. But that's sort of what makes up the Delmarva Peninsula. It's obviously surrounded on both sides by water. One side, the Chesapeake Bay, the other side, the Atlantic Ocean. So this very sort of, if you like beaches and oceans and bays, a lot of that going on the Delmarva Peninsula. But I grew up on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. This is it's a pretty big chunk of land, but it has a pretty small amount of Marylanders. About 8% of Marylanders live in this region, which is less than live in the city of Baltimore. So while it's like a big, in terms of geography, not that many people live there. I'm from the biggest city on the Eastern Shore, a city called Salisbury. We're going to talk about. And it's it's a place where the big industries are fishing, chicken farms, and tourism. That's sort of how the Eastern Shore earns its keep.
And is this like sort of a tourist community where everybody works like crazy for like 4 months a year, and then tons of businesses end up shutting down when the tourists leave, and you kind of subsist throughout the rest of the year, but the summer is like the hot business time?
Yeah, certainly Ocean City, which is like the main beach community in Eastern Shore, Maryland, is exactly like that. It's got a population of like 20,000 during the winter, and then in the summer it's close to 1 million people. Most of those businesses close down in the winter. It's really actually weird to go there in the winter. It's like a ghost town. You're just sort of driving around. They turn off the traffic lights and everything. I mean, it's sort of a scene. But in the summer, it's completely just packed with tourists from sort of DC, the DC metro area, the Baltimore metro area. A lot of folks come down from Philly. It's sort of an affordable beach destination.
And you mentioned Salisbury. Salisbury is kind of like smack dab in the middle of the peninsula. So just give a sense of like what is the distance from Salisbury to Ocean City, or like to drive across the full peninsula? Yeah,
so Salisbury to Ocean City is a drive I know very well because as a teenager I worked on the boardwalk in Ocean City and I lived in Salisbury, and it's about a 30-minute drive, 25 if you're really moving. But got to tell you,
if you're an irresponsible teenager,
I got to tell you, there are a lot of officers who are doing their ticketing duties on Route 50 there. So I would not recommend going too quickly to Ocean City. Follow the speed limit there. But I think I want to start in Salisbury because Salisbury is where I grew up, and I think there's a couple cool things to see in Salisbury. And one of the first things I want to call out is something called the Ward Museum of Wildfowl Art. Have you ever been to a wildfowl art museum, Kiernan?
Wildflowers.
Wildfowl. Fowl.
Fowl, Fowl?
Yeah.
No, is it a taxidermy museum?
It is a mix. There is some taxidermy, but it's mostly carvings.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's mostly carving. So there were these two guys who were brothers, Lem and Steve Ward, and they were Eastern Shore like decoy carvers. They carved the duck decoys that were used by hunters and are still used by hunters. Not the Ward's carvings. They would be very expensive to use as these days. But what started out as sort of a practical thing where they were making these ducks for hunters to use, they eventually got much more artsy and started to create ducks that were clearly not meant to be put in the water and used for to draw other ducks over. And they became sort of like a folk art. And then in 1968, there was a foundation established to sort of protect their best work. And then when I was a kid in 1991, they opened up this massive museum called the Ward Museum. And I remember going to the opening. That's how big of a deal it was in my town. And now it's sort of a beautiful museum that features a lot of work by the Ward brothers, obviously because it's sort of their namesake, but has extended beyond that to sort of folks who work in the foul carving, painting space. So you've got a lot of really interesting stuff. I mean, and I'll post some pictures on the Instagram, but you're going to see like decoys that sort of defy gravity. Like you'll see a duck that's sort of taking off from the marsh, and it's all carved in wood, and it will be very hard for you to understand the mechanics of how it's possible for this duck to be connected to this marsh. I mean, it barely looks like that it could be held up by the little string that's attaching it. It's not a string, a little piece of wood. So there's some really amazing stuff. So you get to actually sort of watch the way that this sort of folk art developed, that these brothers started doing in the 60s, 70s, into this sort of much more elaborate kind of work that you see now. So it's a pretty cool museum. I make a point to go every couple years. In fact, my mom and I just went back about a year ago, and the collection was awesome. And, it's just a really unique place and a great way to sort of spend a few hours and learn about ducks and learn about sort of the art that surrounds it.
So let me add, these are beautiful works of art. I mean, really anatomically accurate and very fascinating. It's cool that it developed out of like a utilitarian, decoy that was used for hunting.
Yeah.
Is hunting like a major pastime in the wetlands around the peninsula, or did it used to be? I'm just curious why this belongs in this area. Yeah,
hunting, duck hunting especially, and deer hunting are big things on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. I never went hunting as a kid. My dad didn't hunt, so I didn't hunt. But I had many, many friends who did. And my dad had many friends who did. So he would, friends would always be bringing over venison and things like that. So it's definitely a big hunting area. The deer population is borderline out of control. So it's actually, the hunting serves like a larger purpose in this context, because if the deer population wasn't trimmed every year, you would have a lot of deers just dying of starvation and things like that. So,
sure. Interesting.
Yeah. So it is hunting and fishing are just a really big part of the culture there.
Well, very neat how it takes that pastime. It kind of combines it with art.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm going to post some of my favorite pictures. There's some really cool stuff. The second thing is, so my friend from high school, Jake Day, hey, Jake. We went to high school together, and now he is mayor of Salisbury.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, exactly. And, he's a really interesting guy, and he's been really focused on bringing the sort of old downtown Salisbury to life. So, a lot of cities had downtowns that, during basically white flight, folks abandoned the downtowns. They got, the buildings started to fall apart. People weren't paying attention. There weren't a lot of stuff going on there. But he's been working, and a lot of mayors around the country, to revitalize the downtown area, to bring more businesses back, to bring housing back, to get rid of all the just massive parking lots that were not really accomplishing anything because people weren't coming to park, and to make it a place that people want to go. And as part of his efforts to do that, he was lucky enough to get the National Folk Festival to sign up for to hold the folk festival in Salisbury downtown for a period of 3 or 4 years. Obviously, things got mixed up because of the pandemic. They had to put off a year. So now the last year of this festival is coming, and I've been twice. And it's a ton of fun. They bring performers from all over the country. It's folk music, it's bluegrass, it's gospel, a real good mix of folks. They have multiple stages. Everything is free, and it happens sort of over 3 days over a long weekend. So that's a really fun event. And I encourage folks, if you're planning a trip to the Eastern Shore, this is coming up near the end of August 26th to the 28th of this year. It's definitely a really special experience, and you might even see me there. I'm still debating with my mom if I'm going to make it down.
Oh, now they've got their cell. Ryan Davis might come. This seems like an obvious place for a live show, Ryan. Maybe we can't book it for this year, but next year, we can do a follow-up to this episode.
I would love to do an episode on the National Folk Festival. It's been going on for a lot of years, and they sort of bring it to different towns every couple of years to sort of highlight different regions and different kinds of music. And so I think Salisbury's been a great host, and they've had incredible attendance. Last year when I went, I had so much fun hanging out, drinking beers on this great lawn and watching just a kind of big variety of folks from, some bluegrass folks in the gospel, and, they have lineups all day. So it's a really cool place. And after you've been to the folk festival and you're hungry, one of the things we eat on the Eastern Shore is blue crabs. Are you a blue crab guy?
Yeah, I enjoy eating crab. I believe are soft shell crabs also a local delicacy?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. People, I love. My dad used to really like soft shell crabs because there's a pretty short season where they're malting their shells, but you can basically eat the whole thing.
The whole thing, yeah.
And so you get a sandwich with a bun and then just a crab slapped on it with the legs hanging over the side, battered and fried.
They just deep fry that baby, yeah.
Exactly,
yeah.
And man, oh man, are they great.
Oh, they're so good. As a kid growing up, you would, I would go crabbing quite a bit. And occasionally you would see the soft shell crabs sort of like hanging out by the beach. They kind of come in and if you touch them, it was so creepy because they just felt like mush.
That's really gross.
As a kid, I was like, because usually crabs are scary. You try to touch them, they're gonna pinch you. But those little guys, they didn't have any, they were just sort of mushy. They couldn't do anything. So.
I see. It's stories like this that I think I find it so interesting. People who grew up on the shore in the East, right? Because I feel like the American concept of beach visiting was completely shaped by the Beach Boys in California.
Oh yeah.
And so, they're out there, they've got their little deuce coupes, wish they all could be California girls. Meanwhile, out on the Eastern Shore of Meriden, out in the Eastern Shore of Maryland, you're poking crabs to see if they're gooey. These are very different concepts of beach living.
Yeah, no. That's the difference between the bay side and the ocean side. The ocean side is much more like the Beach Boys, right?
But you grew up in a town that's right in between those two, right?
Yeah, but as you always talk about my beach house, the house that my family had on the bay side.
Your ocean estate.
Yeah, on the bay side. It's a bay estate, maybe. Definitely not an ocean estate. But the bay side is much more it's really rural. It's far less developed. So you can walk on the beach for half an hour and not see a person.
Wow.
And so that was where I sort of spent a couple years of my life and many summers, and I call those my Huck Finn days because I'm barefoot running through the running through the marsh, coming back with weird fish and animals and shells and unrecognizable from who I am today.
Yeah, that does not ring true, folks.
But back to the Rex here. There's an amazing all-you-can-eat chicken and crab house called the Red Roost. This place has been around since the 1970s. And it is basically a converted chicken coop that is large, probably seats 500 people. And you have to drive for about 20 minutes into the middle of nowhere. You're driving and driving. You think, I can't possibly be going to a restaurant. Your cell phone service goes out, etc. But you finally arrive at this place, the Red Roost, and it's like a mecca for folks who love crabs. You go in, you sit down, and basically they just start pouring in front of you buckets of crabs, fried chicken, hush puppies, corn on the cob. It is the Mid-Atlantic.
That sounds like heaven.
Yeah, it's a Mid-Atlantic feast. We actually went for Easter. The family did this year. So it's a really cool, unique place. I eat out a lot. And this remains one of my favorite sort of restaurant experiences. It is so unique, and the food is so good. So that's your meal for the day when you're going to the Red Roost. And when I would go with my dad, he would bring his own. He had a very good crab knife, because picking crabs is sort of a skill.
Oh yeah,
some people are good at it, some people are not. I'm pretty good at picking crabs. Like I can get 95% of the meat out. I do the claws. I do it all correctly. But
do you suck the legs down?
I do a little of the leg sucking, yeah. But I'm not as good as my dad. I mean, my dad would there would not be a piece of meat left on that crab when he was done with it.
So you say you're probably like a 4 out of 5 star sort of crab eater.
Yeah, I mean, look,
podcast host, crab eater, these things cross over.
Yeah, well, I'm one of the best crab eaters in New York City, probably. but when I go back to Maryland, I see I'm like, oh, these are some real crab eaters. So,
is that why they all call you the Crab Man?
No, that was
that for years.
That was the summer of 2006. That's a whole other reason. So definitely encourage folks to check out the Red Roost Crab House while they're in Maryland. So now I want to skip over to Ocean City, which, as we talked about, is about a half an hour drive from Salisbury. And we've talked a little bit about Ocean City before because I'm obsessed with this park that's there called the Assateague Island Park. Do you remember Assateague Island Park?
I don't. What, have we spoken about it before?
Yeah, this is one of the 2 parks down there that are famous for their feral horses.
Oh, yes, right. Oh, This blew my mind when you told me this existed. Yeah. And it's a national parkland, right?
Yeah, so it's a national seashore. Yeah, it is. Okay. It is cared for by the National Park Service and by the a couple other organizations as well. It's pretty large. It extends into 2 different states, Maryland and Virginia. But Assateague Island is really unique, I think primarily, frankly, because of the fact there's just all these wild horses everywhere. And, they were originally owned by folks, and they were released somehow into the wild. And now many generations later, they are pure feral horses, and they have no interest in you. They're interested in horse activities. They're they're really into like raiding campsites. Like,
is that a horse activity?
Oh yeah, I think yeah.
I'm not a big horse boy, so I don't know what you mean when you say they're into horse activities.
I mean, they like to eat and walk around and leave large, things.
So
of poop
animal
everywhere.
Activities, basic animal activities.
Yeah, basic animal activities. But they're horses, so they're like big, right? So it's like you get out of their way.
Oh yeah. You don't break these horses; they break you.
Yeah, no. If you got on one of these horses, it would not go well for you.
And so, like, are there roads that go through this island?
Yeah, there are paths. There are bike paths. A lot of people will rent a campsite and then camp out. It's funny though, when you camp, it's really important to make sure your cooler and everything is really locked down, because these horses will come in the night. And they will, they will get all your food. They will take it because they're wild animals. So it's been some funny stories. Like a couple of years ago, there was a particularly aggressive horse that was getting everyone's food. So, they're wild animals. They might look beautiful and look like the horses that you might see in your neighbor's like fence. But in reality, wild animals, beautiful to take pictures of. Don't get too close to them, though.
Well, it's those campers' fault for packing all that hay. I mean, you don't need to bring hay on your camping trip.
No, I don't think you do. It's the hay, apples, and the sugar cubes. I'm like, you were asking for it. At that point.
Total. And now, this particular breed of horse, is there certain times of year where if you go and you touch them, they're gooey? I'm just so fascinated with that idea that this is how you passed your time there, right?
No. They never get gooey. They
never shed their shell.
No. They're pretty normal in that respect. But Assateague also has a beautiful beach. So if you want to go to the beach and be around fewer crowds in Ocean City, which we're going to talk about.
But risk being trotted to death by horses.
Yeah, the horses are going to leave you alone mostly. They might walk by, kind of give you a look, but like I said, they're not really interested in you. They're interested in the food you've brought, possibly. But a really cool place. So I'll link that in the show notes. And then there is the boardwalk. So Ocean City has, one of the exactly. Look, it's one of the better boardwalks on the East Coast. I've been thinking about other boardwalks. I know there are a couple in New Jersey that are similar.
Yeah, I've been to the Cape May has a nice boardwalk. Exactly.
But in terms of like pure old school boardwalk activities, the Ocean City Boardwalk, it has it all. There are many rides. You can play skee ball. You can play all those carnival games. There are some places I really enjoy. There's a pizza place called Dough Roller that serves that really thin, oily, cheesy pizza that I think of as boardwalk pizza. But it's very unique to sort of the Mid-Atlantic region. There's a couple places that do it sort of like that, but Dough Roller has 2 outposts right there on the boardwalk in Ocean City. I totally recommend them for lunch. We have a famous French fry place called Thrasher's.
And they specialize in French fries.
All they sell is French fries, Thrasher's French fries. And so, it's a stand. So people are waiting in line to get it. And when I was a kid, folks used to say that the reason the fries are so salty is because it was so hot in the kitchen that all the guys who were making it would sweat into it.
Oh, that's really disgusting.
Yeah. So I don't know if that makes it more or less appetizing to you, but they are really, really good fries. And, don't ask questions is really the boardwalk motto. So that's Thrasher's French fries. And
I want to say that you've mentioned Thrasher's before on the podcast.
I probably have.
I think you have. That sweating into fries just rings a bell from maybe 2 years ago. I'm not sure what episode that would have fit into.
Well, maybe the fries are not as good now because they're all wearing masks and it soaks up all the sweat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They got to get it back.
There's only one way to develop immunity. Eating fries that other people have sweated into.
You're making it more gross than it actually is. It's hot oil. Everything's evaporated.
No, it burns off most of the sweat and just the salt remains.
Yeah, there we go. And the salt's what you want with those French fries. Let me tell you. I'm a big fan of skee ball. Do you ever play skee ball as a kid?
Yeah, I didn't grow up in one of these resort communities that you're describing. So yeah, I remember it from like Chuck E. Cheese, but I was never a skee ball enthusiast.
Well, most of
it was a little too close to sports for me.
Yeah. So down at the inlet, there's a couple very, very large arcades, and they have all the modern stuff that an arcade is supposed to have. But they've kept the old school skee ball, and it's still $0.25 to play. I think when I was a kid, it was 10 cents, but $0.25's not bad for a game. Whenever I take my nephew to the arcade, I'm always trying to get him to play skee ball, and he wants to play Avengers 17 4D or something. But I get him to play a little skee ball. But it is sort of a throwback to simpler times, because you got to remember this boardwalk has been around since like the 30s. I mean, this has been a tourist community for a really, really long time. If you're interested in getting a little history while you're in the boardwalk, there's a museum called the Ocean City Life-Saving Museum that is more interesting than it sounds. It's basically a history of the lifeguards in Ocean City over the last 80 years.
I love obscure museums.
It's fun.
It's just like somebody cared enough to curate these stories and artifacts.
Yeah, and when I was there with my mom, I made a point to point out that the lifeguards have remained handsome over the last 100 years.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It's like they've always
just
had
like wax models.
They've just got lots of photos and sort of weird devices that they would have used to pull people out of the water. I mean, look, the beach is no joke. A few folks get pulled out every year. The riptide is really strong. If you're not a great swimmer, you should stay closer to the shore. Even as a kid, I had a couple moments, because I would be in the ocean like 4, 5, 6 times a year, where you would feel like you were losing control, and it was a scary feeling. But it's also sort of why people love the ocean, I think, right? So yeah, the Ocean City Life-Saving Museum, it's not going to take you a long time, probably a half an hour, 45 minutes, but it's definitely worth seeing if you want to get out of the heat and explore some Ocean City history. And the last thing I want to call out on the boardwalk is this haunted house that I am obsessed with. So in the 1960s, there was this guy named Bill Tracy. And Bill Tracy was the premier haunted house designer in the United States.
Wow.
He designed haunted houses all over the country and boardwalks and theme parks. He was the guy. He designed 82 haunted houses. I mean, that is a lot of haunting.
That is a profession I've never conceived of, but it reminds me of the episode when we talked about designing an escape room. And when I'm thinking about how do you like continually refresh and keep creative haunted house designs, that is a really cool challenge.
Yeah, it is definitely a cool challenge. So this guy made 82 houses. Of the 82, there were only 8 surviving attractions. And one of them, and I think the best preserved based on my reading. In fact, this guy's got like a big cult following. I will link to it in the show notes, but you can see pretty much photos of all 88 places, 82 that he created. Really interesting stuff. So this haunted house, the outside, which is his sort of like retro 60s, weird kind of like, Picasso meets Dali with like some horror thrown in. It's a very weird look, and I'll post a picture of it on the Insta. It's pretty untouched from 1964. They did a renovation in like the 80s and the 90s where they added a couple things, like they added some zombies because people are scared of zombies now. They added a clown because of it, but typically, this is one of those haunted houses you sit in and you ride through, and it takes about 5 minutes. They've left all the old school scares and sort of the kind of cheeky, weird kind of 60s vibe. So I really would recommend folks check out this haunted house. It's not part of any of the amusement parks in Ocean City. It's on its own. It's freestanding on the boardwalk, and it is a really fun ride.
So let me ask this. When you were a kid, were you genuinely scared in it? And when you go today, is anything remain scary?
So when I was a kid, I was absolutely scared of it. It was, I was even more scared of than the haunted house. I was more scared of the ride itself because I don't like roller coasters. As an adult, it's not scary at all. No,
okay.
It's just fun and silly.
And is it like cheeky?
There are some cheeky elements to it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's, and I think when folks see the outside of it, they'll get the sort of retro vibe that wasn't retro at all when he was designing it, but,
sure.
But has become very retro.
Well, even from the exterior, you can see that it's a historic haunted house, not a modern day.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Historic haunted house. We should do an episode.
I'm fascinated by this Bill Tracy character. I'd love to get a biographer on or something to talk about all the ones that are lost now. There are only 8 surviving. I want to know what those others were like.
Well, there is a guy who is an expert on Bill Tracy on the internet, so we'll get him on. Email. Most definitely. So the last one in this sort of Ocean City pile here is something called Furnace Town. So Furnace Town is actually located closer to Snow Hill, Maryland. So it's about a 20-minute drive from Ocean City. And Furnace Town is based around this old iron furnace called the Nasawango Iron Furnace. And this was a furnace that made iron in the 1830s and 40s. And so it is quite a big building made of brick, very tall. And sort of the town decided this is a historic landmark. It was given that status by the U.S. government. And they were like, well, how can we turn this into something where people can come and visit that maybe has a little more going on than just this big furnace? So what happened was a group of folks came together and said, we're going to preserve this location and we're going to bring other old buildings from the area that are from this time period and move them to this site. So they've moved a bunch of buildings completely intact that are from a similar period. So there's an old Nazarene church. There's an old print shop, which is super cool. There's a weaver house. There's a where they would weave cotton. And there's a very cool one-room schoolhouse, which is the oldest one-room schoolhouse surviving in the state of Maryland, and a blacksmith shop. It's a very calm place to go. It's not wildly touristed, but it is a really fun place to spend an afternoon, see the furnace, and then sort of imagine, how these folks lived in the 1830s, 1840s, when this was a community of people who all came around to sort of work on this furnace.
This strikes me as one of those places that you go and you walk away thinking about how incredibly convenient everything is in our lives. Things, like when I'm reading about what it would take to actually produce iron, people would take this bog ore from the swamp. They'd bring in clam and oyster shells, and then they would bring it to 3,000 degrees, which created the basically molten iron. And you just think that, like, it's like, I think about this all the time when I'm potty training my kids. I'm like, do you know how lucky we are that we just live in a place where we can like press a handle and all our waste just disappears from view? And we're so lucky.
In the iron stories, like it's crazy because the heats would get so hot, and the men were like located on the top and the bottom, like the bottom, like scooping the ore, the stuff from the ground, and on the top, putting it into the flames. And so they had to move this really heavy stuff up and down this ramp, and the ramp has been reconstructed, and they had to use mules, but they couldn't convince the mules to go up into the incredibly hot, awful place, because why would a mule want to do that? So they had to blind them.
Oh my God.
I mean, this is the 1830s, is a vicious time. But I mean, I'm just imagining these blind mules being pulled up by these poor men in like 100-degree heat. Oh my
God, this episode, we've got wild horses, we've got blind mules. I mean, this is an emotional turmoil here. I also like that it was called Furnace Town. I like when a company town just puts it right on its face exactly what it is. We're the Maryland Iron Company. We've got a giant furnace. We're calling it Furnace Town, everybody.
Yeah, no, I like the branding. You know exactly what you're going to get when you go to Furnace Town.
Exactly. Just a little peek behind the curtain. So Ford Motor Company has recently announced that they're opening this absolutely massive manufacturing facility for the new electric F-150s. And they were discussing what to call it. And they've ended up calling it Blue Oval City, which I think just like really, like, people don't even know that Ford calls itself the Blue Oval. That's not like a popularly known thing.
I've never even heard that in my life.
Exactly. So I do like that they used city, because it does feel like a throwback to call it like, it's kind of like, it reminds me of like Tomorrowland at Magic Kingdom. But anyway, Blue Oval City, look it up. It's no Furnace Town. No,
very, very few things are Furnace Town. So as you're leaving Furnace Town and you're heading back to Ocean City or towards Salisbury, you're going to come very close to this town called Berlin. And Berlin is a really beautiful example of a unbelievably well-maintained small downtown, dating largely from the late 1800s. So you've got incredibly beautiful churches and banks and stores and things there's a hotel called the Atlantic Hotel that was built in 1903. This is a really lovely place to stop, get a cup of coffee, get lunch somewhere, walk around, check out some antique stores. It's such an idyllic location that it was actually. You ever see the film The Runaway Bride with Richard Gere and Julia Roberts?
Gosh. Yeah, I think like when it originally came out.
So it was supposed to take place in this beautiful small town. It was actually filmed in Berlin. And a lot of people I know were extras in the film. So it's fun for me to watch. So I'm like, hey, that's Mr. Phil from the Community Players of Salisbury, things like that.
Sure.
But it's a really cool little town. I always go there. They've got
there's that local blind mule from Furnace Town wandering through the wedding.
None of the blind mules I think are still around. And all the horses Azatec can see too well, if anything. So that's Berlin. And then the very last area I'm going to talk about today is Cambridge. So Cambridge is closer to the western side. So, if you're coming, if you're visiting the Eastern Shore from Baltimore, D.C. area, you're going to pass through Cambridge sort of on the way to Salisbury. It's about 45 minutes from Salisbury. They have two really cool things in Cambridge. The first is the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Park. So the Eastern Shore of Maryland has, two folks were born there who I think are among the most famous African Americans of all time. You've got Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, who were both born on the Eastern Shore of Maryland and both part of, obviously, the slave trade, but both became, incredibly prominent abolitionists when they got their freedom. Harriet Tubman, as part of the Underground Railroad, went through the Eastern Shore of Maryland. So they've built a national park that sort of tells her story and allows you to sort of walk a lot of the area where, these folks would have been escaping to freedom. So it's a really interesting museum. It is tied into this place called the Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge, which is just an extraordinarily beautiful, well-preserved piece of Eastern Shore marsh. Marshland, sort of like a unique kind of landscape.
Yeah.
But they've made a lot of trails through this, and it's a really beautiful way to spend an afternoon. Go check out the Harriet Tubman Center, learn about her, and then go walk around in these various paths and think about what it must have been like to be basically running for your lives through these marshlands back in the 1800s.
Man, oh man, that Ryan, I have to say, when you suggested Eastern Shore of Maryland, I was skeptical. Maybe that even came through a little bit at the top, but you've really found some interesting historical treasures here. I love the quirky museums. And, you didn't even spend that much time on the fact that you're near beautiful beaches. So you can do a nice mix of these historical and, you've brought out some kind of dark, thoughtful, emotional history. But also some, wild nature that's just steps away from the beach. And then you got your throwback boardwalks and haunted houses. I'm like desperate to go visit.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot to do. It's a great family trip because we didn't talk about the 55 themed mini golf opportunities and all that good stuff. I mean, Ocean City is a wild town. So
are there any particularly weird mini golf themes?
I mean, they're all like underwater, dinosaur, caveman, it's all that kind of stuff. There's nothing like super fun because it's Ocean City, but somebody should move there and do something kind of kooky. I bet it would go well now.
I love it.
Well, I think that is, plenty of time to spend down on the Eastern Shore. I think folks got a taste of the crabs and they can hear the bay. And I think it's time probably for the last stop.
The last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
All right, Ryan, this is the last segment of the show, the final segment of the show. That's why we call it the last stop. It's my favorite segment. It's your favorite segment. It's popularly known as the people segment. And that's because it's a moment for community. It's where you and I each bring something of ourselves and we share. It's not unlike the Last Supper, where we're coming together. Is it like the Last Supper, Ren?
Well, no, because we hopefully will do another Last Stop in the future.
That's
only one Last Supper.
Sure.
Not 120 of them.
Fair point. I take it back. It's nothing like the Last Supper, but there is something holy and contemplative about the Last Stop because you and I each bring one thing. It can be anything. It can be a piece of gear, a daydream. It could be a recountance of a trip that we've recently taken, maybe a local attraction that we're checking out. But it has to fit one criterion. It has to inspire the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. So, Ryan, I have to ask you, as I ask you every episode, are you going to earn this 4-star rating? That, do you have a last stop?
I do. So, I'm planning my trip to Peru. And one of the things I do when I'm going on a trip is I try to get a lot of books that are going to be relevant while I'm there. So I try to mix it up between history of the place I'm going and novels written by authors who are from the country I'm going to and who are talking about, their experiences. So in doing my research, I was embarrassed to learn about somebody who I should have known about before, Mario Vargas Llosa. And this guy is a Peruvian novelist who won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2010. Has an incredible body of work that dates back from the 1960s. I'm going through the novels of his that I'm going to read. But one of them is called Aunt Julia and the Scriptwriter. It's one that he's really well known for. The Time of a Hero, he's really well known for. But this guy's been writing for so long, has a Nobel Prize, and is still alive and lives in Peru at 86. So super excited to sort of get into his work and learn more about him and learn more about Peru. We've got a lot of train time that I think is going to be really prime. It's going to be good to be reading about a novel that takes place in the Andes while going through them on the train. So super excited about that. And just like another, something I was just like, wow, I thought I knew most of the global novelists, certainly the ones living. And I'm just, it's so hard to keep up. So very excited.
How long is that train ride?
They're on the train for like 2.5 days.
Wow. Oh man. So it's like a sleeper car.
Yeah, we got a sleeper car. Yeah.
Oh, man, that's really fun.
And it's the train that's got like the glass when everything's glass, so you can you see from every angle.
Yeah, that's amazing. Which company did you go with?
I do not remember.
Okay,
that's a chase question.
And Ryan, of course, you're basing a lot of the itinerary on our famous Peru trilogy back in the archives. And, I want to remind you also, while you're picking up books about Peru, you've got to make some time for Turn Right at Machu Picchu, Rediscovering the Lost City One Step at a Time, by our very first guest ever on the show, Mark Adams.
Yes, the great Mark Adams.
This is the quintessential, Americans traveling to Peru book. You'll be on the flight there. You will see at least 10 copies of this book being read.
Well, I appreciate the reminder. I will add that to my my queue right now.
It's a really, really fun read.
So did you bring us a last stop this week?
I did, of course, Ryan. So, because you were talking about where you grew up, I was reminiscing about where I grew up and what kind of attractions are nearby. And I definitely want to do an episode on like a pizza tour of New Haven, because New Haven famous for our pizzas. And I was very spoiled for pizza growing up. But what I was thinking about for where the town that I grew up in, which is just about 10 minutes outside New Haven, called Wallingford, Connecticut, we are on the map for one specific attraction, and it is called Neil's Donuts. And it is this extraordinary donut shop that opened 20 years ago. And it was basically a salesman who had very exacting standards for the donuts that he liked to bring to sales meetings. He found himself complaining about it so often, he quit sales, he opened up a donut shop, and has become really famous for having created these extraordinary donuts. And I have to say, I am not a big donut eater generally. I do have a sweet tooth, but donuts just like don't ring my bell. But Neil's
I'm like a one donut kind of guy if I'm going to do a donut.
Yeah, for me, like just the amount of like calories that that you're devoting to that.
Yeah, you're such a health nut.
No, I'm not. But that's so not true. I'm willing to indulge when something needs to be indulged. And Neil Donuts, it's something that Neil's Donuts are totally on my radar whenever I go home. And I was interested to find this list from Food and Wine magazine, which is the best donut in every state. And luckily in Connecticut, they certainly did their research well. And they did spotlight Neil's Donuts specifically. But these are these types of lists that I like to bookmark and come back to, so that if I'm going on a road trip, I know, I'm going to spend 10, 12 hours on the road going through a bunch of states. Maybe this is a nice way to break up the drive. Try to hit, the best donut shops in each of these places. So, Ryan, I'm curious to know whether you happen to have ever heard of the Maryland choice. It's in Hagerstown, and it's called Crumpy's Donuts.
I have not. No.
You're familiar with Hagerstown, though?
I am. Yeah, not super familiar, but if I'm next time, if I ever and in Hagerstown again, I will have to check it out.
And similarly, I'm going to put on my to-do list the Massachusetts choice in East Longmeadow called Donut Dip. They say it's not far from the Mass Turnpike, so I certainly ride that frequently enough that I'll be able to. That's actually how I go down to visit, so I could stop at Donut Dip and then go right to Neil's Donuts on my way to see my mom.
Well, bring me one of those next time.
Sure. Yeah, you know what? I'll hit all the donut shops all the best donut shops, Massachusetts, Connecticut. I'll hit New York, and then we can meet in the city.
All right. So what are we talking about next week, Kiernan?
Ryan, I'm going to be doing an episode all about Rocky Mountain National Park. This is one of the great Colorado national parks. I'm sure this summer it's going to be a very popular destination, and I was lucky enough to spend some time there a couple years ago.
I can't wait. I gotta get to a national park this summer. Maybe you're going to inspire me in this conversation.
I actually want to talk to you about maybe early fall. You and I could do a little boys trip.
I would love it. Well, until then, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken? Where am I? That's one of the blind people wandering into the podcast studio.